What's up, man? How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, yeah. Um, yeah, you've written a few articles I think that got some attention, so we'll talk about those in a bit. But yeah, it's good to meet you. I actually had no idea what you look like or or anything. So I just walked into the conference like this guy writes some cool stuff. I know nothing else about him except a few email exchanges we've had, but it's awesome to finally meet you. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, I can give a super high level one. I'm Nik Suresh. I'm a data engineer down here in Melbourne. I used to be a data scientist, and then I left because no one needed any data science done. Just kept joining companies, had nothing for me to do. Just get paid a lot of money to do nothing, which is it's like really good for 6 months, and around the 7 month, you go like, humans need to do things to stay healthy, right? Like sitting in this office chair doing nothing is not good for me. And then yeah, I kind of bounced around. Data engineering was a much better field, which is how you were across my radar, because
Mm.
it was so crazy when you emailed me, because I went, that name is very familiar.
Oh, that's
And
hilarious.
then I kind of went away for like 5 days, and I think I was like brushing my teeth, and I went, oh my god, he wrote the book, that's who that is. Yeah, and then eventually was having real trouble finding data work in Melbourne that like had any serious prospects of being meaningful. Most of the
Hmm.
jobs were very maybe the word I'd use is aspirational but uninformed. So they were spinning up these huge projects with like no pathway to how this would make money for anyone, which actually I think really ties into it's like literally the first chapter of your book, right? It's like, hey, do something that like makes money and don't waste all your time doing handcrafted, like
Yeah. Well, because
super bespoke serverless.
I mean, I had the moniker many years ago, recovering data scientist, for precisely that reason. Because I had, similar to you, be brought into companies with aspirations of doing data science. Neither there's no data upon which to do any science or anything for that matter, or availability of data is so creaky, like the infrastructure's not there. That's how I got into data engineering. It seems like that's kind of your path as well, sort of this trough of disillusionment of the kind of the bullshit of data science. But it's interesting.
Yeah. Uh,
You
I'm
know,
glad you
Mel,
said bullshit
yeah, it
because
is.
now
It
I could
is.
I know I could be that open.
Well, I mean, you have titles like "I will fucking pile drive you" if you mention AI again. So I think we kind of set a precedent for um using adult language here. So um, have at it. Just become as unhinged and cuss as much as you want. It's fine.
Sure.
That's um, that's interesting though, because I've been to Melbourne a couple times. Great city. Um, And there were lots of data engineers that showed up to the conferences as this for Data Eng Bytes. But I could never get any insight into that. So what you mentioned was very interesting, where you felt like the data job market in Melbourne was, I guess, as you put it, aspirational, or was I reading that wrong? Or um,
Yeah, aspirational, but I don't mean like in a good way. I mean in the same way that people like will buy lots of books on the gym and fitness, but then like not go to the gym.
hmm,
Like the the market for aspiring to data operations is much bigger than like the actual market for doing something meaningful with data. And it's kind of like when you think about it, it's kind of obvious, right? Because like most businesses invest in data well after they're already profitable or like have some mechanism for making money, right? So you've got, let's say you're selling books, you're probably selling enough books that you can afford to hire a data engineer. And at that point, you're hoping anything you do that isn't selling more books, you're hoping is going to just increase your book sales by some percentage or decrease your costs of selling those books by some percentage. And the need for data to do that is actually weirdly limited for small to medium sized businesses,
mhm.
because usually you can just walk onto the ground and then like ask someone what's wrong here, like what's bothering you every day. You don't need, especially for data science, right? You're talking about deploying an algorithm that sees patterns that humans literally can't see.
Yeah.
And then you're also banking on those patterns being the ones that are going to drop your costs by the most appreciable percentage. And in Melbourne, people are rolling data stuff out just because they heard it's what it's done at big companies. To use Amazon or Google for an example, um, the last normal employment I had before starting my own consultancy, I should have put that way at the beginning, have my own consultancy,
Oh.
is that uh, like the last normal normal job. I just took like a normal permanent contract, and it slowly drove me insane. I joined this. It's like one of the biggest data platforms in Melbourne, and it's like got everything. It's like a Snowflake DPT, like the state of the art, and the whole thing was just driven by a pile of spreadsheets going into S3, going into DynamoDB, going back into Snowflake. Like just really. Oh, and of course it's all serverless. To process like a few gigs of data every day. It just like broke my brain. I was like, I cannot do this anymore. But that's how people are architecting things here. That solution is completely inappropriate unless you are a massive, massive company. And they're out here spending millions in consulting fees to architect this thing that doesn't make sense from day one, because it's what you would do at Amazon. And the thing is, it might make sense at Amazon minus the spreadsheet part. It's all, yeah, just very weird to me. It's like a strange circus dimension.
Why do you think that architecture came into existence?
I think that's a great question. I actually I was around when they started discussing it, and then left that organization for a while and came back some years later. And um, I think just kind of a misunderstanding of how dangerous complexity is in systems. Because they can see the theoretical upsides to having something that scales forever but doesn't cost you. You're not pulling stuff in.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say it's twofold. One is like just no respect for how much data you can crunch in one EC2 instance. Um, I think people are really surprised what you can do with compute if you use it sensibly. We could do everything on like one or two boxes. And I think the second thing is just the bigger they make the diagram, the more impressive they think the platform is. And they're completely mistaking the sophistication and number of buzzwords for like
Mhm.
what this actually delivers in business terms. And to get to what you observed at the conference, one of the problems is a very big marketing move for companies here around their data. A lot of it is prestige, right? So
Mm.
the more buzzwords they put onto a slide and then go to a conference, the more sophisticated the space generally seems. But then you go to these places and you actually look at how they did it, and it's almost never like a very smooth, savvy, what's that thing Primogen says, like a coconut butter experience. Like
I've never heard
it's
that.
not slick.
Interesting.
It's yeah, yeah, it's just what he calls it, with some things like very smooth and slick. Like someone good at Emacs is coconut buttered, and yeah, you go in, it's just spreadsheets on spreadsheets on spreadsheets, because they haven't changed the quality of the staff they have employed. A lot of the time, it's an executive who called me and bragged about training all their data analysts into data engineers in the course of 1 year. And they said that they'd given them all 2 hours per sprint to study. Just what does that even mean? So what does that round down to? Like 50 hours in a year to retrain? That's an executive at one of the biggest institutions in Australia.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
I know it depends on what you would study, I guess. I don't know what he taught them. Obviously, they'd be great if they read my book. I'm kidding. But I don't know if you could finish it in 50 hours, though. It's a big book. Maybe you could. That's interesting, though. So it seems like this, you're noticing like a lot of theatrics or theater, like
yeah,
visual
yeah,
theater.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And a few places do it right, but it's
Yeah.
interesting because they're a very small percentage of the market, and because everyone is posturing, it's very hard to find them.
Yeah.
They all look the same until you join on day one, and you go, "This is not what you advertised."
Well, because there's the bait and switch, right? In the interview process, you talk to people who are interviewing you, and obviously they want you to think they're cool. It's like, yeah, we have all this cool stuff. We use these tools. Um, all the data you need's available. And of course, you show up day one, and like, a lot of it was not quite true. Um, I mean, I've had that happen. I don't even know how many times. Um, yeah, I mean, the same reason I started a consultancy was just very similar to how you position yours too, where it's kind of like we're not here to bullshit you or lie to you. Like if you wanted like honest work from honest people, like you can work with us. If you want charlatans, you can they're around too. You can go find them. Um
Yeah.
but But I mean, I started my consultancy precisely because I just got tired of like just joining companies and realizing it was kind of just a house of cards data wise. So
Yeah, a lot of people dislike my writing because they go like, oh, it's very cynical, it's very this, it's very that. But the thing, and you probably relate to this, starting a consultancy, you don't get to have illusions about the industry because if you're selling quality and actual outcomes, the hardest thing about the sales process is realizing a lot of people aren't even buying quality outcomes. You
right.
really have to look for people that know what they need the thing for, and they're not just buying it for no reason because then they won't buy it from you. You're probably like more expensive. You're not going to put every buzzword in, which frequently is what people are buying. Um, and my experience so far has been a handful of places will pay like a lot of money because they can put a dollar value on what you're doing,
Yep.
and a lot of them just kind of waste your time. They they just keep naming different pieces of technology, and we've had to. I think the biggest learning experience starting the business has been saying no to those people immediately.
Yeah.
You know, don't have the little false hope phase where you're like, maybe we'll talk them into seriousness. It's like if they
No.
mention Lambda, they're probably not serious, like unless they're massive.
Yeah. That's so true. That's good too that you say no to people. I think that's something a lot of consultants don't do. Maybe it's because they, you know, everyone. I think that the normal tendency for consultants is to try and get money any way you can. Um, and especially if you're doing billable hours and stuff, like you want to get in and just milk the client as hard as you can. But that could come at a reputational cost for the consultant, obviously, especially in a market like Australia. It's a bit smaller than the States, right? So the data scene there is um, even in the States it's small, but in Australia, so I always thought of it as a reputational thing where like the number one thing I'm always trying to preserve is just reputation and try and grow that because if you can grow reputation, then you'll get the clients. But if you lose reputation, like word will get around. So you're absolutely right. You want to get the right clients because getting the wrong client is I mean, consulting's hard enough, and just dealing with dipshits is like not fun at all. So
Yeah,
now I feel like you have a
yeah.
job. So
Well, that's exactly it, right? Because the thing is, like, awful people, like, they tend not to pay very well. They tend to be obnoxious when you talk to them.
yeah,
And so much, almost everyone I know who has left the IT space for other stuff, and, like, the number is growing a little bit. Um, when I ask them, like, why, it is almost always the quality of people they're forced to interact with.
yeah,
And observation I made to a friend the other day was that so my dad is a surgeon back in Malaysia, and he doesn't understand any of these IT issues. He's like, how could like the average intervention be so bad? And it occurred to me we're in a little bit of a unique space, which is well his work is much harder than mine, but to some degree, he can't see the degree to which you can botch a project because like everyone in his field is well trained and he knows what he's doing. But we're in the only field where the business feels it is necessary to intervene every day. Like if you have a data engineer on staff or a programmer or anyone who like doesn't do something from Monday to Friday, they're like that was a waste of resourcing. But like that's not how you run like effective IT operations, right? You do not want to intervene and cause complications every day. And we're on the only field where not only can we operate on the patient for 2 years straight without stopping. If you do stop, someone gets annoyed. They're like, that's extra capacity, right? He could be doing something. But they do not understand it's like a living system, right? We're just stacking scar tissue on there every single day for 2 years, and then at the end they go, "Oh, why can't we ship the product?" And it goes, "The patient's bleeding out." All right, like you told me to keep cutting, so I kept cutting.
that's such an interesting description. I've never thought of that, and it's highly accurate actually. That's really interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it's I just think a lot of Rich Hickey's talk on is simple made easy, and it's like about creating complexity in systems. Are you familiar with that talk?
Uh-uh. I'm gonna go put that on the
I,
notes
I
then.
I think you would love it. It would immediately be a huge vibe, and the core of it is this disambiguation between the idea of something being hard and complex. So complex in his world doesn't mean it was like hard to do. It means you've tangled your systems up into spaghetti.
Hmm.
And easy and hard just means like, did you have to write it from scratch in C, or did you just like import data engineering in Python or something like that? And people get them confused, right? So if something was easy, like I just typed in one line, they're like, that means it's simple, but it's not. It's like something that popped into my mind. I've read your book very early in my career. I started 2019 in data engineering. Um, Very early on, you introduced me to the concept of uh, filling your warehouse, doing real time streaming from just reading like Postgres transaction logs. And at the time, I was like, "Man, I didn't know you could do that, right? They don't teach you that at university."
Did I write
Um,
that? I can't remember if I wrote that or not. Maybe.
oh, it was very early on, just like an
Okay.
example of
Okay. If I,
real time processing. Well, you know, it's like a neat thing, right? I didn't even know Postgres had transaction logs at that point. So, you know,
yeah,
I
yeah, they
was
did.
very
Yeah.
early in the field. And yeah, I was thinking about it. I was like, that's always struck me as a very elegant solution because it's a byproduct of data coming into a system and you get it for free. And like you
Yep.
can read from that without messing with Postgres as long as you don't lock the file or whatever. I've never had to do it, but I was like, that's what he'd call like an uncomplected system, right?
Yeah.
It's a straight line. You tack your warehouse onto the end and everyone's happy. Um, but most people don't have an appreciation that they're just building a big spaghetti bowl. Um,
It happens.
Yeah, and they're just really fake. That's why we use Python for everything. I like Python, but we're just like really addicted to the fact it's very easy. You
Hmm.
can you can import TensorFlow and have no regard for what you just did upstream, like to the whole process.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah, I mean, I was talking with somebody about SQL, because I have really exciting conversations like that. Um, but I think I brought up the notion of the SQL spaghetti monster, where at some point, if you're not thinking about the code, especially on a team, then SQL is a special thing too, where your business logic can get very contorted, especially when you have multiple people with slight variations in business logic, and then it's insanely hard to reconcile these things. But it's easy to do this, I think to your example, like it's super easy to conjure the spaghetti monster. Um, and this happens in architecture too. Architecture, especially when you have vendor prescribed ones like modern data stack, for example, like that's, I think, an example of something that was vendor driven, where there are just a certain technologies you could chain together, whether or not it made any sense for you. But that was sort of um, the brand name clothes you had to wear at that during that time. So
Yeah, and it's not unique to data engineering or data science,
no.
and even this whole Gen AI thing, right? I think there's just this weird distaste for technical work. Um,
Mm,
Such that there's a hope that if you throw enough money at it, you won't have to do hard things. And it's just never the case, right? Like
yeah.
everyone here is they're getting really into Snowflake and Databricks now, but they don't want to fix their data models. And the other thing your book introduced me to, I hadn't really thought about this till now. I kind of read it, and then it just like things floated around my subconscious for 5 years. Um, but or maybe it hasn't been out for 5 years. I think it came
It came
out.
out 2 years. 2 years ago, almost to the day.
Was it only 2 years ago?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
You
man,
might be
I've still
mistaking
lost
me
track of
for
time.
another. You might be mistaken for the other Joe
No,
recently,
no, no.
actually. But
It's
I know we talk about those examples in the book. So, but yeah, it
yeah.
just
I can't remember when I read it
it
exactly. I just
transcends time and
remember.
space. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's well, so it was actually introduced to me by this guy Dave Coulter. So
okay,
when you're in Melbourne, he's who we're going to catch up with. So
nice,
he's a very he's a big deal here. He's like a big data engineering guy.
cool.
And maybe it was a couple of years in actually, because I was still a data scientist. So he must have sent it to me when I switched to data engineering. If that makes sense. Um, but God, what was I saying? We were on the topic of uh, SQL spaghetti monsters. I think
Yeah,
things being easy. Yeah, there's just this. idea that if you roll out something very expensive from a vendor, your problems are going to get solved. And your book introduced me to the idea of embedding data engineers in like upstream teams, right? Like whoever makes the application producing the data.
Yeah.
That was really interesting to me because the first thing was I had like a formal education in relational databases, which when I left university, I was like, everyone knows this. And then I joined the workforce and I was like,
No.
people have no idea what like third normal form is.
No.
Like, it's one of the few academic things that I'm like, you kind of need to know this one. And yeah, you talked about bringing data engineers so that the database looks good, like when it hits the transactional system and then the analytics system.
Yeah.
That seems like the kind of organizational change needed to do good data operations.
Yeah.
But it's very hard because you got to restructure and put someone in, and then you have to like give up on your political ambitions for 1 year as they refactor things into
Yeah.
sensibility. Um, but no one does that. They just buy Snowflake and they pour the garbage into Snowflake.
It happens a lot, especially with
And
ELT, because it's like just dump your data in from your transactional systems or your systems of record, most of which have pretty crap data models to begin with, and then you're going to uh, somehow magically make that data awesome. So yeah, that happens a lot. Like I'm working on a new book on data modeling right now, and it's actually meant to be a kind of end to end. So starting with transactional and operational systems and then analytics and machine learning, but like the first one I mentioned, transactional and operational, like that's the place where you have to get it right. So it's you actually geared a lot towards software engineers, this book, not data people. I think data people in a lot of cases are like on the receiving end of just a sewage pipe of, all kinds of great stuff. Um, but the transactional systems, like that's where the magic happens. But data modeling, you say
yeah,
when we mention that to people, they're like, what is that? Like, I'm a normal person. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I get it.
yeah, and it's it makes me very nervous about the field. I've been picking up a lot of general software engineering skills
Mm,
um, because I'm starting to realize that we're probably going to default back to at some point fixing those transactional systems
yep.
because the infinite money fire hose into data warehouses that don't have good data in them, like it can't run forever. At some point, the industry is going to move on. And at least here in Melbourne, that was happening until the Gen AI thing.
Oh,
So
interesting.
the not out of data engineering, the data science jobs were disappearing. And then my estimate was like in another couple of years, the engineering jobs were gonna not disappear, but like the market would shrink and we'd have overproduced. Um, they've kind of gone the wrong direction. The next big thing seems to be data governance, which is important, but it doesn't supplant actually having useful data. There's no point governing garbage.
Yeah.
We seem to be deflected into that again, and it's just all going to bounce back to just do your software engineering correct one day.
Oh, I completely agree with that. And like, what's driving the governance discussion?
This is a spicy take. I think it's if you read an actual like complex data governance book, like they're actually fairly technical. Like there's implementation details. I think data governance has become very popular amongst a class of middle manager that doesn't have the technical skills to get an engineering job, but allows them to draw like data engineering level salaries. And I think
Interesting.
that's the big push. So if you talk to data governance people here, they do a lot of PowerPoints, just lots and lots of PowerPoints where they kind of draw abstractions on top of the organization and then go, and then someone else is going to make this happen, and it's
Yeah,
not terribly useful.
that's interesting. I mean, I'm seeing in the States where governance is coming back, but it's more from the perspective of generative AI, for example, like large language models, and just understanding, okay, so like what data do we have? How do we make sure it's protected? Maybe not going outside the corporate firewall to OpenAI, which happens a surprising amount. They're not supposed to do that. Um, and then the discussions are also around like regulations and stuff, right? So I think like obviously GDPR is a kind of old hat at this point, but still probably violated more than we'd probably like to think. And then the EU
Mm,
AI Act, I think a lot of people are trying to figure that one out too. That just got passed what was it, a few weeks ago. So those are the governance discussions I'm seeing in the States. And that's my perspective. I'm sure there's other things happening, but I think that's really interesting because I thought I wasn't clear on like the whole data management and governance scene, I guess, in Australia. Just because I it's not a place I party in that much in the data governance land. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've been thinking of moving the. There's enough work in that area. We're thinking of actually pivoting the consultancy in that direction because we have two people who are pretty good at the governance stuff.
nope.
But again, like kind of speaking strategically, I don't know if that's useful to. I'm guessing your listeners are mostly data engineers.
They're everybody
But
actually. Yeah, just all kinds of nerds listen to this thing. So pivot however you want.
oh, perfect. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Thinking about it, like as a business owner, on one hand, it's very tempting to hang around, whatever part of the economy has a lot of hype around it. Like we can generate data engineering work forever, but I'm not sure that's sustainable in like a 5 to 10 year time horizon.
Right.
Because eventually people are going to like, well, we've all bought Snowflake. And I don't think we want to pivot to a new warehouse again for no reason because we're not getting money out of it. And then, I'm going to be left sitting there going like, man, I really wish I didn't position us here. Whereas doing a governance right from a technical perspective seems like a huge differentiator in the current market.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people seem pretty happy to hire Deloitte to. The customers can't discern the difference between like a good migration plan or organizational transformation and a bad one. And this is the core problem with consulting, right? That if they could discern it, they wouldn't need a consultant. So how do you signal that you're actually different? And you can do some superficial things, like you mentioned. Our websites have the same energy, but of course, anyone can write anything. So how do you demonstrate the technical difference in a way that someone is scared of computers will understand?
Mm.
Um, and
How
we're
do you
like,
do
maybe,
that?
maybe, maybe. I get a lot of advice from a guy called David Kellum, who just talks a lot about. He's just like a marketing genius as far as I'm concerned. But for me, a lot of it is through my writing, and it's not because
Yeah.
my writing indicates like massive technical proficiency. It's that I've said very expensive things online, right? Some companies probably won't hire me because of what I've said. Um, and I didn't get money for doing that, right? Like I don't have affiliate links or advertising or anything. So people more or less know like this person takes his ethics very, very seriously. Um, so yeah, saying something expensive is probably a good starting point.
Yeah, I don't see it in a million years, Deloitte, publishing an article that I will fucking pile drive you if you mention AI again. I don't think that they would write an article. I will fucking haymaker you if you mention agile again, and so on, right? But it's like, um, I've spoken at Deloitte's offices a few times. I make they're not like this. But that's good. I mean, I think that you need to. Uh, this is part of branding, right? I mean, you have to go out sometime on a limb and uh, you know, let people know what you're about. That's how you stand out. So I mean, yeah, you probably alienated a significant number of people, but you also probably gained a good following of people that were going to be fans, and that's I do that in my own way, right? I think, but that's kind of what you got to do these days. So,
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. Some people hate it. I do a lot of improvised theater here in Melbourne, of all things.
oh no way.
And something they teach you very early on is if you go on a stage and you want to seem like you're angry or something, about half the audience will completely misread your emotion. You
Mm,
cannot architect your public facing image in such a way that it is never understood. Even that Gen AI rant, it's not even like it went so viral, but it was not calibrated for it, right? Because if you swear in a title, you actually just get caught in most filters and you can't get shared in workplaces.
right.
I just wrote it because I felt that way. And some percent of the population still went. I remember one guy was like, I really like this, and then I realized it's just marketing for his consultancy. Like it's completely soulless. There's no like to find my consultancy. He had to go to my homepage and then to about me, where the consultancy is not even mentioned by name because I don't use the blog to push the consultancy. He
Yeah.
went through all that work and was like, "Oh, I could theoretically find out where this guy works. What a scumbag!" After putting all this effort into it, people are just like that.
They are. I mean, people find a way to complain about everything, though. You know what I mean? Like I remember, right, my book was coming out. Bill Inman told me, he'd written like 67 books or some crazy number like that. But he told me that, just expect that there's going to be a percentage of people that hate your guts no matter what, and not just what you wrote, but like you personally. Um, just, you're like human trash to people, and that's just that certain people are just going to be that way. They're going to find some way to hate you.
Did
So,
that actually happen for a data engineering book?
dude,
Like, it's
I
not
mean,
spicy material.
no, I mean it's like the most bland material you can think of. But like, if you look at some of the comments, like the one-star reviews on Amazon are always hilarious to read. Like, there's comments like blah blah blah, just a bunch of words. I'm like, yeah, but you could say that about like any book. You know what I mean? And it's like,
Just
it's like, okay, thank you. Then another guy wrote like, what was it? It was the dumbest thing I'd ever read, but it was this book is not about data science. It's about data architecture. I was like, no shit. It literally says that in the title.
the title. Oh my god! Like, what is wrong with?
Fucking moron.
The just a bunch of words. That's gonna stick with me for like the next 40 years.
Well, yeah.
Someone buys a book and then complains it's full of words. That's a big thinker right there.
Yeah, I was just like, yeah, I mean, I don't know how some of these people turn on their computer in the morning. It's crazy. But those people are out there, right? So, I mean, of course, somebody's going to figure out a way. I mean, somebody wrote a Reddit post about me on the data engineering Reddit last year about somebody in Melbourne, actually, about how I was in it. I'm only in it for the money and selling books. And this is somebody who I guess came up to me during the conference last year and was probably asking for some like free consulting, like just trying to get advice. And I was like, I have to go because I literally had to go. And I think I probably, burned him off. And then that person took it like, well, he's just in it for the money. And I was like, because I was like, it's already in my book. Maybe I always say that anyway. Just go. I mean, I wrote it for a reason, so I don't have to keep repeating myself every second. But that person took it to be that I was like a greedy scumbag. And they were kind enough to make a Reddit post about it, which was hilarious. But then they deleted their account because like all my friends dogpiled on them and was like, what are you talking about? Like you're
What are you
insane.
talking
And
about?
then a few of my friends dug into the person's comment history and they found out like the person's like a total like was definitely commenting on other stuff which I won't mention, very adult like things on Reddit. And this person deleted their account. So
Yeah, I see. Well, I mean,
I was just like, what the
again,
fuck?
clearly not the world's greatest thinker. Again, yeah, it is weird because from
Happens.
inside, it's something I write about a lot, which is like from inside corporations. And I think a lot of people relate to this. There is like this constant pressure to um, pretend that everyone's like a really cool person and doing self work, and you don't have a stakeholder that hates you and doesn't respect your job. And like, it's a hard line to walk because sometimes people just don't understand, and you need to like help them figure out what you do and be a cool person, and eventually you can be on the same page. But like a lot of people just kind of suck and don't self-reflect and bulldoze people.
Yeah.
Um, and like as a consultant, you don't get to have illusions about that because those people will approach you for work and just try to rip you off and be awful.
Oh yeah.
And but inside a company, you can't say that. You can't be like, Greg's just terrible. He's clearly doing cocaine. Like, he's not bringing his best self to work every day. And but you can't say that. That's not okay. But like in reality, yeah, a lot of like whoever that person was who was just super mean to you and clearly kind of clueless, like they probably have a job. They're just out there terrorizing someone that can't just delete them off Reddit, right?
Right.
Like there's someone's manager and they just suck every day. I hope they don't listen to this podcast. It feels like
Eh,
cyberbullying, but you know what I mean. I'll move off.
whatever. Yeah, I mean, we're not naming names though, but the thing is, well, the person deleted account, you can't find their name actually. But no, that's absolutely right. I think the thing with people like us is we're feral. Like we don't have employers, so I think in a lot of ways we do live in the real world where it's like we go eat what we kill. That's something that's hard to do. But the other part
Mm,
of it is like you also have the liberty of writing stuff like you do and saying the stuff that you do. Like if you were at a day job and you put this in the company blog, for example, or you send it out as a email, in the internal email to company, you'd be like, yeah, Nick, HR wants to talk to you for a second about
yeah, yeah. Like
yeah.
it's no lies detected, but you can't say that, right? Like it's not okay to point it out. Yeah, you're talking about eating what you kill. I think that's something starting a business gave me a huge amount of appreciation for. When I started working, I didn't understand why I was being paid so well when I frequently didn't feel like I was providing good value.
Mm,
Um, and like I worked pretty hard, but I was like literally in a part of the business where value delivery was not possible because like the real value was actually in fixing some application that belonged to a transactional team upstream, and I like wasn't allowed to touch that. So all I could do was like beg them. And maybe there's some line where I brain hack them. Like I just needed to flowchart the dialogue a little bit better to fix their thing. But like realistically, it wasn't going to happen, right? I just didn't have the ability to do that. Um, but I'm trying to think of like how to phrase this. Um, for a long time, I tried to figure out like I thought there must be a reason I was being paid so much as a data scientist, a data engineer, and starting a consultancy, you actually have an appreciation for how hard it is to generate like one salary's worth in sales. Um, and then you stop taking that money for granted, right? And I still think I wasn't being paid for any reason, but I'm like, it just blows my mind how many people who are employed full time, like, they have no idea how hard it would be to like turn their salary over. And it makes me very nervous when I now don't want to go into roles where I don't think I'm paying my own salary very visibly,
Hmm.
because I'm just going to get laid off immediately. Like the moment there's a downturn, they'll be like, "There's no." Even if I am making that money, if there's no relationship that like shows up in a way that someone in accounting can just look at and go like, "It makes zero financial sense to fire this person." Um, yeah, it just makes me super super nervous, and a lot of data roles are like that.
Yeah.
I just never feel secure in my employment.
Well, that's why you're starting to see a lot of data teams, going away or getting cut pretty heavily. At least in the States, that's what's happening. I don't know what's happening in Australia, but I know in the States, it's like it's a bloodbath. Data teams and data people are being cut left and right still. And this is about 2.5 years into the downturn, but it's bad.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting you're seeing that down in the US. It's the same here. The bloodbath is not it's not as bad as it could be.
Mm.
But put it this way: so 2 years ago, if you did day rate contracting in Australia, the rate was like $1,500 a day. I'm talking monopoly dollars, Australian dollars, which is
Oh
not a
yeah.
lot in the states.
It's like five
Um,
dollars here. I'm just kidding.
it's like you can buy 2 cans of Coke a day. Um, that is now down to about like I think the median job's paying like 900 to 1,000 a day.
Wow.
Like that's pretty huge contraction. And it happened very quietly, like the rates just one day dropped. Um, and we haven't even hit peak recession or anything. We're just because the value in most data teams is not terribly apparent. We're like a leading indicator for the rest of the economy. We get cut speculatively, I think.
Mm.
Whereas no one like lays off like their core application team just in case. Like they wait till the very last minute.
And even then, you're gonna probably have them on a contract because otherwise, unless you don't care about your app, I guess. But
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't want to stress out team people working in data. I think there'll always be jobs for like people who are good. But
who are
I think
good.
there's a lot of, but you have to do a lot of work to like let people know you're good,
I was about to say,
and
like,
that's
visibility is a big thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I kind of wonder what that looks like for people because I know a lot of people just don't want to get into marketing or branding or writing. Um, but I'm kind of at this stage in my career when people tell me that I go like, I'm sorry you don't find it interesting, but that's like saying you want to get really fit, but you will not touch a gym. Like it's
I've
just
touched a lot of
not.
books. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I was actually talking with somebody else about this today, career advice, and it was uh somebody is asking like how can I do what you're doing? And I'm like, I don't know that you want to or could replicate what happened. Because a lot of it was luck. But they said that, the number one bit of career advice I have regardless is like no matter if you want to have a popular blog like yourself or whatever, but it's like obscurity is your number one enemy, right? And visibility. And it's like and you just live in a world where you can either, I think to your point, you can either start working that muscle and and getting better at it and getting that visibility. But if you're not, then who is going to do it for you? There's nobody's going to be out there being a promoter. It's like that's just how it is these days. I mean, it is. I hate to use the word cutthroat, but it's competitive for sure. Jobs are, and that's just another thing you have to think about. You're absolutely right. And I hear the same thing, like, oh, I don't want to be self-promotional. And it's like, it's not about being self-promotional, as much as it is, I would say, um, being relevant in the eyes of others, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, and you don't have to like do a lot, right? Like I actually think it's pretty easy to get to an audience of like 10 people, and as
yeah,
long as they're in your city, that's already like transformational career-wise. Um, it's a weird thing. So like my blog is huge now. I don't actually get more career opportunity than I did when it was like 100 people. And it was very easy to get to 100 people. Like I'm pretty sure I could bootstrap blogs to 100 people like
yeah,
every month if I wanted to. Getting to like thousands, like that's a different thing. I think it's a lot of luck and personality involved. Like if I took all the rants off my blog, my audience would be smaller, but it would
for
still
sure.
be big enough that I could do like I'd get job offers and things.
Yeah.
But you can't do nothing. And yeah, I don't know. It's just so I still study a lot of tech stuff because uh, I think that the the thing that makes you a grifter is if your communication skill exceeds your technical skill.
Yeah.
And it actually doesn't matter how good your technical skill is because if you just keep getting better at writing, you become a grifter against your will just because you're talking a better game than you can deliver.
It
Um,
happens. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like it's yeah, it's just how it is, right? Like if you were a good junior and then you write for 20 years, at some point you become a grifter, right? Because at one point the skills lined up, and then eventually you just started speaking so well you can convince anyone of anything, but have no idea what you should be telling them to do. So I still do a lot of technical stuff, but a lot of my time now goes into marketing and chatting with executives that I respect around like economic issues and trying to understand more about how these large
Mm,
businesses work, and just things that have like nothing to do with writing code specifically or rolling solutions out. Um, and I think that's very unpalatable to a lot of engineers. And I mostly encourage them to try it because once I started it, I didn't want to do it either. I did it because I felt like I had to, and then I found it was pretty interesting. Even marketing is. I never thought I'd say this. Marketing's like kind of fun, even though
marketing's really fun. And if you're a data
it's
person,
just such a
marketing's
bad
awesome
rap.
because marketing's also very numbers driven too. Like I would say it's one of the purest forms of data work is marketing and sales.
Yeah, yeah, and it's got like really interesting engineering problems. Like we're thinking of spending the next couple of months putting one of our team on redoing our website because we get so many leads through it, and we do want to like hone down on the kind of person we're getting because I
Mm,
think our website looks great to engineers, but we probably need to be selling to people slightly higher in the organization. And we're like, oh, we can build A/B testing in it like from the start, right? Like instead of getting a website and tacking this on top and working around all these hacks, like we can just build a thing that does the A/B testing natively and put lots of great integrations in. And like from a data perspective, that's so exciting to me. Not because I love harvesting data. My blog doesn't do that at all. I hate it.
right.
But because it's like it's a real data set with economic value that I can tweak, and I don't have to bug someone at a company to like let me change it. Like I have complete ownership of the thing. That's so exciting.
How did you come up with your blog? Like what was the what made you decide to write your first post?
Well, here's the funny thing. My very first post was after a bad meeting, but that's not the real first post.
Interesting.
The real reason I wrote it is I was getting pretty. So I started writing it when I was in my last like fully employed gig, and I was trying to think less about work because it was bothering me spending so much time doing like 40 hours a week in the office. I started the blog to write a 50,000 word essay on how to run Dungeons and Dragons more effectively. it's a, I still have that draft post in there somewhere. And I never finished it. I got like 10,000 words in, which for me is shockingly only like a couple hours of writing. And then I had a meeting that was so dumb that I wrote an article called like "Most Data Work
It,
Seems Worthless."
yeah, from February 27th, 2023. Yeah. It's the first one on this blog, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I've done some other writing elsewhere when I was still in
Okay.
psychology. That's where I was before
Interesting.
I was in tech. But like this
Interesting.
blog, it has a huge draft D&D post just sitting there, and it'll probably still come out one day when I finish it. But
I
yeah,
think
like I just had a meeting where they just kept talking about agile, and I thought I was going insane. I was like, this is so divorced from doing any work. And I'm not saying doing work because I'm obsessed with working. I'm very lazy. I like working the smallest amount to get good outcomes for everyone. But I mean, like, they were talking about working really hard on Jira, which is exhausting and pointless and not interesting. And I was like, I'm done. I'm tapped out. I was still anonymous back then because I was worried about like fallout. Um,
yeah, that's actually the
yeah,
post that put you on my radar. This one, because that circulated, I remember. And it did go viral. Uh,
yeah. That was I started writing at 7 p.m. in Melbourne. I finished at 9. I put it in Hacker News and went straight to bed. And then I woke up and all my friends were like, you're number one on Hacker News, that thing you
yeah,
just
that's where I
wrote.
found it. That's well, that's pretty ballsy, like posting it on Hacker News, then going to bed. Weren't you at all curious, like how it was going to do?
Well, I was like, it's just one post on like a fresh blog. So I was like, it's going to do 5 views.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll be lucky to get five. Five is a lot better than 0. Like genuinely, I was like, that's a reasonable starting point, right? And I woke up and I was like, cool, I don't even know. Like if I could pick something to go viral and stick my brand against, I don't know. It's a weird one because like that was very authentically how I felt. Like it's not a happy post. I was just depressed. I was like, what is
No, but you could tell.
happening? Like what?
But you said the quiet parts out loud though, right? I think it's one of those posts for anyone who's worked in data, like myself and everyone is like, yeah, been there a lot. Makes sense,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that was the impression because I was on Slack groups with people and everyone's talking about the post. Like, this guy's cynical, but then other people are like, no, he's completely spot on. I was in that camp. I was like, cynical or not, I mean, it's well written and it came straight from the heart. Like, there was no way you could bullshit this post, you know. So
I Something really interesting to me is well, first I had the weird experience of because I was anonymous, people would send me my own article and ask me what I thought about it, and
I
invariably I would just go like, "This guy seems like a jerk. He seems real full of himself." But I think the weird thing was from a lot of like employees at companies, there's this kind of mythology in an office that like it is career suicide to question the value of your department, because it threatens everyone's job, right? You cannot get that message out there. And people would come to me from companies I know, and they would say things like, yeah, but we saved $3 million last year. And I go, I mean, I don't know if I believe that, like, given what I know. And they'd go, how dare you say that? And then I would talk to like their executives like a few weeks or months later as they got more popular. And they would say things like, oh, yeah, like we did not save $3 million. Like that's just a like a convenient fabrication. We needed more funding for this and this and this.
oh shit.
It's just how companies work, right? And it's just interesting because to me I was like, of course you didn't save $3 million. You don't have a proposed mechanism for doing that. They just do this thing where they estimate how much time they saved and they put a dollar value in that and they go,
Yeah.
that's X million. And to a certain class of employee that is like extremely compelling, and they fully believe it, and their ego is like tied up in it. And I just haven't had the heart to tell them, like, your boss's boss doesn't think that, right? Like, that's not the view
Yeah.
from the top. And they think they're lying. They think everyone's in on it. They don't realize it is fully convincing to you. And even I just saw this at my desk. So there's this guy, Emmanuel Maggiore. So this book's not out yet. He sent me a copy to review, and I quite enjoy it. But this is another weird one where he reached out, sent me the book, and I was like, why does his name sound so familiar? And I realized I'd read an article he wrote years ago when he was consulting, and it was called something like "I've worked 10 years I've been employed for 10 years but never done any work.
Mm,
And he just described like median, not even a rare IT project, like the average one.
yeah.
It's just like a lot of people sitting around, and even if they want to work, they're just not. They're not near the system that is the difference maker. So they're just hanging out while people do stuff on Jira. And yeah, I just thought it was really funny that he yeah, I like picked up the book and I was reading it. I'm like, why does that sound old familiar? And then at one point he goes, I wrote this article, and I'm like, oh damn, it's you. You know,
Okay.
you're me from the future.
That's awesome. When does that book come out?
Maybe it's already out. Hold on. Yeah, it's called Silicon. I'm quite enjoying it. I think it is out. Silicon. It looks like you can. Yeah, you can order it. So it looks like it must have come out. So I have to apologize to him for not reviewing it in time for like the big push.
Damn
But
it.
um,
It's the number one new release
yeah,
in business technology and innovation on Amazon. That's
yeah,
cool.
it's really interesting. It talks about something I thought about a lot, which was like the Twitter layoffs. I'd never worked somewhere like Twitter. So when they had all those layoffs, I remember thinking, if this is like anywhere I've worked, because I've quietly thought that unless you're at a really good place, you could just lay everyone off and it would kind of be okay. But I wasn't that confident, right? I was like, maybe I'm on bad teams. Maybe I really don't understand that I am generating value I can't see. So Twitter did the layoffs. I remember a lot of, they're very quiet now. A lot of SREs were like, I am 100% confident Twitter will stop working in 1 month. And I don't like Elon Musk, but it clearly kind of worked. Like the website still exists. And like they had some outages, but I'm just kind of sitting here going, and like, I'm sympathetic to everyone that got laid off, but also like that's the career risk if you go to a place and aren't clear in your value proposition. Because it turned out like that was, I don't think it was a very sound strategic move. I think he's just emotionally dysregulated. But it turns out just randomly firing people works at the average company. That's horrifying for everyone's job security.
Well, yeah, 80% I think they cut there. And it was interesting. I mean, I got some, I'm not going to name names or give too much, but it sounded like the back end data infrastructure, like a lot of it was expensive and arguably not needed. At least it's from what I've heard. Again, I don't work there, but that's
Yeah, yeah.
what I heard behind the scenes. There's just a lot of just a lot of machinery, So uh, yeah, but it's impressive because now because your tech team can have a blog about all the stuff they build, right? And this happened as a lot of companies where it's like, here's all the cool stuff we've done, which in some cases I'm sure it's great. In other cases, I'm like, I don't know if it's great. I don't work there, but it makes for a good blog post though. So
Yeah, yeah, and it I guess kind of circles all the way back to start the conversation around like the mythology around the field.
yeah,
Um, it's just so hard to tell. When a company says we bought Snowflake and DBT and we have best in class everything. At this point, the only thing I believe is I'm like, you need to show me like a financial statement around this, and I need to see your code base. And anything, no matter how sophisticated it is, I'm just going to be like, I don't believe this is good. I think it is 3 spreadsheets and a trench coat. Like that's actually what it is.
oh, that's hilarious. Are you gonna write a book anytime soon?
I am actually writing one. It doesn't have a title and it's still early days. I got approached by a publisher very recently, and I almost signed with them, and then at the last second they were like, "Our team has decided you can't swear in the book,"
What?
and well, they just said it can't swear. I don't want to embarrass the publishers. I'm not going to name them,
Yeah, that's fine.
but
Don't.
they said you can't swear, and I went. I mean, firstly, you reached out to me and you read my blog, so like that's a real weird move. Um, but then we kind of got more into the discussion, and I don't even know if I want to swear in a book, right? I take books more seriously than blogs, and maybe I feel like a little bit crass in a book. But I was like, why would I immediately tie my hands if I have more circulation than you? Like this doesn't make any like what am I
Yeah,
getting out of this deal? And they were just like didn't have a comeback for that. So yeah, probably gonna self-publish. And
that's a
yeah,
good
I don't know.
idea. I mean, if you have distribution, which you do, then I think self-publishing makes a lot of sense. And like, I'm doing this with my next book. Like, it's on my it's on a new imprint that I'll unveil later this year. But it's like early drafts of the book, early drafts of chapters are on Substack. So that's what I'm doing because it's like people can pay for early access and can write in public and I think validate the ideas and build the audience around the book, right? So that's the approach I'm taking. But yeah, if you look at the
Yeah.
economics of writing a book, it's like if you have the platform, because the publisher's not going to help you with marketing, they don't. It's on you. So then you got to figure that out. And if you already have the audience, you could write the book you want, swear all you want, and keep most of the money. So
Yeah, yeah. Your first book was O'Reilly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I know there's value in an editor and stuff, but at this point, I'm like, I'll just hire my own so I can pick someone I write with.
your writing is good enough. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can find an editor if you want. So there's two types. There's like a development editor who's going to help you while writing the book. So that's more kind of the structure of everything, and making sure the flow is there and making sure your book is on point. But then there's like copy editor, which you can get to, and that's more just like going through your book with a fine tooth comb and making sure everything is punctuated correctly. But that's you can find that anywhere. So
Yeah.
I
Okay.
wouldn't be
That's
surprised if there's
that's
an
good to
LLM
know.
that does it actually. I wouldn't be surprised if you could find some sort of bot that will do that too. So
I I've actually found that I can't. I have the only thing I've tried to use LLMs for in my writing is look for typos, and it they're big blog posts, and it does something funny to the context window, and then they just start saying nonsense.
oh, fun.
I actually don't think let alone a book. I'm like, I don't think I could chuck a whole chapter in at a time. I just don't think it would work.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want tips on publishing or writing, let me know. I'm happy to help. It's fun. I think it's yeah, because I was looking at the amount of stuff you've written. I'm like, you should definitely write a book at some point. It just
Yeah, I appreciate that, and appreciate the kind words on the writing quality. I did have a question for you right before we wrap up.
yeah,
Um, in the States, so you're mostly in the data engineering space.
yeah.
Have you seen any particularly workable Gen AI projects? Because I get asked a lot about this. I haven't. I know some must exist. I'm not like that much of an anti Gen AI dude, but
I think
I haven't seen anything that's compelling.
in the creative industries, I think there's actually some compelling use cases. I would say where it's okay, I'll tell like the common ones in our field in data engineering, like code gen is the area where everyone talks about Gen AI. So I think maybe last year, I think a lot of engineers were enamored with Copilot and so forth. You fast forward to now, and it feels like it's pretty mixed. Like some people still love them, and I think others feel like it actually causes them to do more work than they need to. And like that's so actually they're moving back to just kind of being old school and just using autocomplete, like IntelliSense or something like that. So
Yeah,
that's one view where, but it's interesting because I feel like that's an area where there's been a lot of discussion of, is Gen AI gonna like, is coding the killer app for Gen AI? But where I see it being used a lot is going to be in stuff like filmmaking and more creative stuff where like generating content is like that's literally what it does. And for that stuff, it's like amazing. Like at least the demos of Sora, the video stuff. I was like, that's insane. That's cool. It's also going to probably lay off like a lot of in the film industry, but a
mm,
friend of mine recently started a he announced he raised money for his new company. It's Colin Kaepernick, who is the quarterback for the 49ers. And he had a publishing company or has a publishing company where he publishes books for underrepresented people, right? So he got famous because he did the kneel during the national anthem at the NFL National Football League games, and then got
yeah. I mean, it's remarkable that you've actually picked an American athlete I recognize.
oh, interesting. Okay, no, I mean, I
There's
wasn't
only
sure.
like
It's like,
three.
yeah, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so he's a friend of mine, and like he started a new company where he wanted to use Gen AI to give people the chance to create their own stories. Like if you're a kid, you can make a superhero and create a whole movie about this, and I think that's cool. Like I think those are the sorts of applications where I'm like, you're going to see a lot more stuff in that. I mean, it's tailor made for that, right? Because it drops the cost
Yeah,
of
yeah,
content production to zero. And I'm bullish on that kind of stuff. Like I've been showing my kids like they use it all the time for image creation and hopefully video soon. I think that's cool. I've seen some other stuff. Uh, like I can't really name a name right now because it's not out yet, but a very prominent person in the AI world. Um, he was showing me a chatbot that he made of himself where he's giving career advice.
Right.
And I think you'll see that. And I think that's pretty cool. He said making it was actually really, really difficult because you think it would be easy, but then it gives on the, without a lot of tuning and kind of agentic workflows, it was like the advice that was given was like super generic. It was like, get a job. And it's like, yeah, no shit, I'm asking for career advice. Like, thank you. So
Get a career. Step
it's,
one.
it's like it's like okay. So it's hard, but I think those are the kinds of things where I'm seeing it. But it's like Gen AI is good at synthesizing information, so creating new stuff or summarizing it. But it's an interesting one. I was talking to a friend of mine at one of the big three cloud companies. I'm not going to name which one, but this person was saying that there's definitely a lot of interest, and so he has a customer facing role, so he's out talking to customers a lot. But it's like there's basically no Gen AI projects in production, right? So it's a lot of it's
Mm,
POC, and he's like, a lot of these are probably going to be stuck there too, because because a lot of it's an education thing. So he's saying like companies are asking, well, why don't I just train my own model, my own large language model? And it's like, dude, do you know how expensive that is? And like, um, like you don't have enough money to do that. So
yeah. I just wrote something for MIT Technology Review. Paid author now. Very exciting. Very exciting.
congrats, that's
And
awesome, man.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's why I was actually talking about an editor because I had a really good editor with. I can probably name the person. I worked with Alison REF. I apologize if I get her surname wrong if she ever listens to this. Having a good editor is fantastic. Like
That's
it
so
came
cool.
out so much better than when it started. Part of it is I'm not used to short form, so it really helped.
Mm,
But I was writing about this. I was going like, there's a huge difference between importing OpenAI and having like data science capability in your organization.
yeah.
And the comparison I made was like running to deploy a chatbot that clearly isn't going to work now. That's like buying a toaster because you heard like the next toaster model is going to be really, really good. Like you don't actually have a competitive advantage by buying this toaster. You're just going to have to buy a new toaster. Building a good culture of data science and having like capability in the team is how you eventually find your pathway to training an LLM. But like if you're a retailer, like you don't worry about it. Don't invest in the space at all. Just wait until you have like something concrete.
Yeah.
Don't buy a toaster for no reason. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, that data science team too is going to know whether Gen AI is going to make sense to begin with or not, right? They might just tell you, yeah, I know you're hip on large language models. We don't need one right now. Those are the best kind that are just um, they're just honest with you too. Although I think that there's also the incentive where if you are on a data science team and you had the opportunity to do Gen AI, it's kind of like you want to have that on your resume because that's, cool. So you're gonna make up probably some project where you can do that. And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're fun. They're really quick. I've realized we're over time, so
yeah,
I don't
no
want
worries,
to
man.
don't want to keep you too
No,
long.
it's good. It's all good. Well, cool. Yeah, it's great talking to you, and I'll see you in Melbourne, I guess, shortly. But for people who want to find more about you, how can they do that?
Yep. So they can hit up my blog. So they can go to ludic.blog. Ludic is Ludic, or they can hit up our company on hermit-tech.com. Those are the two places. I had to buy the first domain because the actual URL for my blog is so long. It's so horrible.
That's so cool, though. Dude, it's finally great to talk to you. Like I said, I only knew about you, like I said, through your posts and like hopping on the call. I was like, I wonder what he looks like. This would be fun to chat. So, um, it's
Yeah. Oh, I mean,
hilarious.
just imagine how I feel because you're like it's fun blog guy, and I'm sitting here going like, as far as I know, you've written the most modern treatment of data engineering there is. Only the shocking thing in Melbourne is everyone doesn't know your book. Only the best engineers do. I think of
Interesting.
like three people. Knowing your book is so highly correlated with being awesome. Like if that's
Yeah.
the only interview question I asked, it would be like enough to hire a whole team.
That's so cool. Well, let's get some coffee in Melbourne. I know that Melbourne prides itself on having the best coffee in the world. So the only thing I ask is you show me the best coffee shop in Melbourne. So
I already got in mind. It'll be good.
awesome, dude. All right. Well, have a good one.
All
See
right,
you soon.
catch you around.
Take care, bud.